Anna, thank you. Chinan, Anshawaki Yuhat Doasaku, Yena Ayahat, Deshitan Nahat Siti. I try every year to speak a little bit more, but I shared with you, my name is Anshawatki, Lady of the Land. I am of the Raven Moiety. I am the Deshitan clan adopted, and I am proud to be with you all today. Know that I miss you, and I send virtual hugs back to you. I want to start by acknowledging the indigenous lands of the Dena'ina peoples, where I am speaking to you from, and to Chief Aaron Leggett of the Eklutna tribes of Chinan. AFN truly is the gathering that I look forward most to each year. It allows all of us, native and non-native, to come together. We reconnect, we laugh, we share stories, we dance at Koyana, we take lots and lots of pictures. It really is where we renew friendships. And it is those shared values that get us through tough times. And 2020 is really a tough time. Switching from in-person to virtual, I wasn't quite sure how AFN was going to work this year, but it has been amazing to see how it has come together with the speakers, all that has gone into it. Julie, Ben, Nicole, the whole AFN team, the leadership, you truly deserve our thanks for a remarkable convention and virtual conversation. Really, the whole week is a reminder of how much we can accomplish when we're working together. As Reverend Dr. Trimble Gilbert said at Elders and Youth at the beginning of the week, he said, we cannot make anything grow when we fight each other. Those are important words to remember. I was in Sitka in February, and I met with Paulette Marino. She's the president of Alaska Native Sisterhood. And we visited at Paulette's mother's house over tea, and she shared her concerns about the situation in Angoon. They had not had ferry service for some period of time. The shelves in the store were empty. And that weekend, volunteers from ANS and ANB from throughout the community, Forest Service employees, they came together at the ANB hall to fill food boxes that had come with donated food and supplies. It was flown out to Angoon by Alaska Seaplane, Wings of Alaska. It was community, it was people coming together to help. And when the pandemic forced Head Start classes to close, leaders and staff from across the state found ways to keep food and formula and diapers and parenting support coming. It was leaders like Deb Townbridge at Coeric, Kristen Ramstead at Rural Cap, Katrina Nooneman at FNA. We really saw that leadership manifest. When New Talk lost power for 3 weeks, and families lost thousands of pounds of food that they had collected, Tribal Administrator Andrew John jumped to action between hunters and fishermen in the community, working with nonprofits like Food Bank of Alaska, businesses like Myers Farm, the Alaska Commercial Company. They found ways to refill those freezers. The pandemic and what we've seen with the poor fish runs around the state have given so many a laser focus on food security. The high cost of food, the fact that in Alaska we import about 95% of our food, and of course the changing climate's impact on fish and game and berries, our existing challenges have only been worsened by this pandemic. But with innovation and teamwork, we are seeing progress. Building on AFN's food security resolution that was passed in 2016, and good advice from folks like Melanie Banke, Seth Kantner, Angela Peter, Marna Sanford, Rose Vostick, many more. The state of Alaska just recently received just about $2 million to help individuals, tribes, churches, schools, and others grow and process and store more local food, including subsistence foods, in our communities. So next month, look for the Alaska Division of Agriculture to put out a request for application there. That again was responsive to what we heard from so many of you. Really all across the state, Alaskans have found ways to do more for their neighbors, their community, and the people that are working the front lines. I appreciate that you have recognized Dr. Ann Zink for her role and the opportunity that she has had to present here to the convention. But we've seen so many others stepping up in different ways. Doyon built 2 man camps, turned an existing camp into temporary housing for village residents who were stuck due to travel restrictions. Nana supported elder care kits, which included everything from masks, thermometers, pulse oximeters. Almost all of the regional and village corporations have provided support to their communities to plan, to prepare, and to respond alongside tribes and tribal consortiums. In rural Alaska, I think we recognize that we don't get lost in these arguments about who should respond. Everyone who can just does. They pitch in. And that's why I've been so frustrated with what was an historic effort to respond to the pandemic has turned into this fight to replace lost revenues for tribal businesses in the lower 48. When we developed the CARES Act, Dawn and Dan and I fought really hard to ensure that $8 billion was set aside for tribes and Alaska Native corporations to respond to the pandemic. And those funds were solely intended to support the cost of responding to the pandemic. Now, some have tried to make this about sovereignty and have ignored how many Alaska Natives, particularly in urban areas like Anchorage and Fairbanks, how many are served by 638 compacts that are executed by ANCSA regional corporations and their designated tribal organizations. So leaving ANCs out of the response fund in the CARES Act could disenfranchise tens of thousands of Alaska Natives. We have seen with COVID-19 a spotlight, and one of those spotlights has really served to highlight the inequality in our country in a multitude of different ways. Areas that lack adequate broadband face disparate impacts as kids try to learn virtually. Low-income service sector workers have been hit perhaps the hardest. Minority communities face higher death rates and limited access to care. And we see that anger and frustration over these inequities manifest in racial tensions across the country. And it challenges all of us to ask the broader question, how do we address inequality in our country? And I think it starts by acknowledging inequality and the challenges facing people of color. So whether it's through my work on the Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Equal Rights Amendment, or to extend the census deadline, we must do everything that we can to ensure that every Alaskan is counted and that your voices are heard. We've begun to make some headway on the matter, the epidemic truly of missing and murdered Indigenous women. When I joined with Senator Heidi Heitkamp in 2017 in working to advance Savannah's Act, this crisis was largely ignored by the media and by policymakers. But together with many of you, we persisted, and just days ago, both Savannah's Act and the Non-Invisible Act became law. So that was great news. Last year, I told you that I had added specific funding for the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women initiative to my Interior Appropriations Bill. And this year, 6 offices dedicated to cold cases have opened across the country, including one in Anchorage. Thanks to Assistant Secretary Sweeney's strong leadership, along with the partnership of Dan and Dawn in our delegation, We've brought federal attention and resources to the public safety crisis in rural Alaska. Attorney General Barr has never forgotten what he saw when he visited us. He continues to be an ally in pushing for more public safety resources. Dan has led with his Power Act, turning his work on Choose Respect to the national level and ensuring victims of sexual assault have access to the legal services that they need. So he's been a real leader there. We recognize that resources are more important than ever, as stay-at-home orders have added new stressors on vulnerable families. I know we all grieved this summer when we saw 5 domestic violence homicides in Western Alaska in just a 10-day period. The pandemic has limited access to shelters. It's decreased bed capacity that was already consistently full. So I've been leading the effort to secure funding for tribes and tribal organizations to serve survivors, including for domestic violence shelters, and working on solutions to increase bed capacity. I really appreciate the work of so many. I think about tireless advocates like Tammy Giroux at the Alaska Native Women's Center, but really work to make this happen. Ultimately, we have to develop lasting partnerships that provide a durable commitment to public safety that rural Alaska needs. My Tribal Public Safety Empowerment Act proposes to expand the jurisdiction that we won in the 2013 VAWA to include sexual violence, sex trafficking, and stalking. Don Young first proposed this idea when the House took up its version of VAWA, and we've worked really closely together in developing our latest bill here. I think it's important to recognize that Don's position in the House empowers our entire delegation, and our seniority is really critical. It's key for Alaska. With term limits on Senate committee leadership, this is my last year as chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, but next year I'm going to gain a leadership role on the Indian Affairs Committee, and I intend to focus on fostering the innovation that's happening all across Alaska. We see so many examples. For example, Alaska's tribal health system helps show other states how to respond to the current public health crisis. What we've learned, the power of telemedicine, the importance of supply chains, and the critical role the tribal health system plays in supporting the entire health system in our state. I think these will all help inform efforts to improve the IHS. So from public safety to public health, and from economic development to infrastructure and telecommunications, the Indian Affairs Committee will provide a forum for us all to dive into the challenges that we're seeing and to collaborate on innovative solutions, just as we have done on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, where I've used my tenure and my seniority to advance priorities for our state. We've opened new lands for development in the NPRA and in the 1002. We've ensured access to the Tongass by enacting legislation like the See Alaska Lands Bill and the Mental Health Trust Land Exchange. We've got more on the way. I'm introducing a new bill that will finally provide lands for the 5 landless communities in Southeast, as well as equitable revenue sharing from resource development. I'm also closely monitoring the proposed Pebble Mine. I've been clear throughout that I oppose the project. I recognize the need for new economic development in Southwest Alaska. I think we all do. But I simply think that this is the wrong mine in the wrong place. The administration has said that Pebble cannot be permitted as proposed, and I agree with that. And I plan to build on my appropriations language from last year to ensure that the Bristol Bay region remains protected. But while we may have stopped Pebble today, I think now is the time to start thinking about the future. We need longer-term protections for the region that can also provide enduring value for Alaskans. And I'm planning on working on that in this next Congress. I want to conclude my remarks by noting how this day started off. Julie, we were introduced to the head of Northern Command, General Van Hert, It was a reminder of the role that the military plays for us in Alaska. But your efforts, Julie, to bring the military to this broader Alaska dialogue, I think are so important, and they're certainly paying real dividends. And it's not just in greater attention to the Arctic and Alaska, but in drawing in companies like PDI, like SpaceX and OneWeb to discuss new satellite technologies and helping us gain support for a Ted Stevens Arctic Security Study Center. Ted Stevens is always with me, guiding me to do what's right for Alaska, regardless of the politics. Just as visionary Alaskans like Mary Jane Fate, Jacob Adams, and Byron Malott will always be with me. From Mary Jane's grace to Jake's quiet strength to Byron's proud heart, each blessed us with their leadership. They gave us their friendship, and their legacies live on in the institutions that they have entrusted to us. I try to remember the strength of their wisdom when I think of the suffering that the pandemic continues to cause. And when the politics of division, of personal destruction, and hate cloud our present, and the outrage of the day drives us to distraction, I reflect upon the ways that they worked together and the examples that they have set. Those are examples that we can follow. Those are the approaches that will help us through this year and lead us to brighter days. Thank you, and Gulashtish.